This will be available on the Guild YouTube channel, as well as on my own YouTube channel, which you can see there. If you just do a Google search for YouTube and then in DNA and family tree research in inverted commas, you'll find this video and also a variety of other videos relating to DNA. So for those of you that want a DNA primer and a DNA introduction, there's a lot of information there, and there's a couple of very, very specific DNA YouTube videos that you will find quite useful. The other source of information for DNA in general is the Who Do You Think You Are YouTube channel that we set up for DNA, and if you do a Google search, you'll find that as well. And the Genetic Genealogy Ireland YouTube channel has a lot of very, very useful educational videos as well. Debbie certainly has a couple of videos there as well. So hopefully by the end of this session, you will have at least the basics that you need to start a project and to start recruiting testers. Now, there are a variety of different sources of support. These slide handouts of a how-to talk that I gave on the mechanics and the logistics of navigating the Family Tree DNA website are available on that link there. There's also a longer version of this presentation available as 4 videos on the Guild YouTube channel.
Do we have to write all this down, and where will we find it on the Guild site?
You will find it on the Guild YouTube channel in this actual YouTube, because I'm recording the slides with my voiceover, so it just saves you taking notes. Feel free to take photographs if you do have a slide of particular interest. There's also some videos on the FTDNA Learning Center. The GAP guidelines are guidelines for project administrators. So do consult them. They kind of give you a very, very good briefing on what is expected of you as a project administrator for a DNA study. Then there's a variety of Facebook pages, the ISOG, the YDNA Project Administrators Facebook group, and then there's one recently set up just for any kind of project administrator, whether it's a geographic project, a haplogroup project, a surname project. There's various mailing lists, and there's of course Susan Mates, the Guild DNA advisor. If in doubt, ask Susan. That is your mantra. And then we have the ISOG wiki as well, which is largely Debbie's work actually, so that's an excellent resource for everybody. Another great resource is our fellow GOONS member James Irvine's seminal article on DNA Surname Project Administration. And what James did in this 2010 article was to look at 10 mature DNA studies and compared across various criteria at these studies and picked out ones that will help you in the design of your own particular project. Now at this stage I know that many of you are interested in DNA testing, but I'd say a lot of you don't need to do a DNA project. Some of you may not need to do DNA at all because you think, well, the documentary evidence is there and I don't need any questions answered. Some of you may have one family branch over here, one family branch over there, and you don't have any documentary evidence connecting the two. You might just need to test each of those branches and then that is your answer. It doesn't necessarily require a project per se. So that's just to keep in mind. A project is more to do with many, many branches. So for example, in my Spearn study, I have 235 branches. The question is, are they all related? So that's the kind of question that it would be addressed by a DNA project. Setting up a DNA project is actually extremely easy. You can do it in 7 simple steps. Step 1 is setting your goal, and this is arguably the most important part of your project. You should come back and review your objectives regularly. You should revise them as time goes on, because your concept of the project may very well change as you get new data coming in. Use an STP approach: situation, target, proposal. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? So a logical, objective approach. Start with the background to your project, and this is pure one-name study type of material. The suspected origins and evolution of your surname. Do you think it's single or multiple in origin? Where did it start? Where did it spread? How many branches do you have? And be as specific about your goals as possible. A vague goal is simply to help my family tree. A much more specific goal is to identify which of the branches you have identified are actually genetically related to each other. So be specific. There's like SMART objectives. The typical aims of a one-name study DNA project, and these are on the handout on the table, are to identify which members are most closely related to each other, and those that have similar genetic signatures can be grouped together into genetic families whose members share a relatively recent common ancestor. A second goal is to help members establish to which genetic family they belong, because one of the ways to attract members into the study is you'll be able to say to them, hopefully, if enough people test, we can find out which branch of the family you belong to. This allows people to piggyback onto established genealogies. And this is a very important aspect for American and Australian members who might know that they came from England or they came from Ireland, but know nothing else apart from that. If you actually match somebody who has an extensive genealogy, you can piggyback on that and jump back generations in time in your own family history research. Another important objective is to confirm the paper trail evidence and traditional genealogies that already exist. And this is a very, very useful function of a DNA project. And a positive match between two members who believe they are descended from the same common ancestor on the basis of traditional documentary evidence can help confirm that relationship. A fourth objective, to help to focus further documentary research. And that happened to me in the Spearman project, where I didn't believe that any of us were related. It turned out that we were all related, and it really helped focus our research on early Limerick in the 1700s. A fifth objective is to identify the likely origin of each genetic family, the location, the surname founder, if possible, and whether it's a single or multiple origin. A sixth objective might be to study the evolution of the surname from its earliest origins to its present-day forms, and lastly, to document and publish the results along the way so that others can derive the maximum benefit from the project. So these would be the typical aims of a one-name study DNA project that I've gleaned from looking at the objectives of many DNA projects that are available on Family Tree DNA. Some of these objectives will be pertinent to your own particular case, some of them will not. So during the interactive session, when you're chatting amongst yourselves, it'd be an idea to go through each of the goals, pick out the ones that are particularly relevant to your situation, and maybe even order them in order of importance. Step 2 in terms of setting up your DNA projects is to decide on your surname variants. And oftentimes it will be obvious from your own research. If not, then there's a variety of different surname dictionaries. For the Irish, there's Patrick Wolfe and MacLysett. For the English, it's Reaney. Scottish is Black. And the Welsh are John and Sheila Rowlands. And soon we'll have the family names in the UK project. And thanks to Debbie for supplying me with a lot of that information. Step 3 is, where are your project participants going to come from? Where is your target audience? And again, you will have done a lot of this work already from looking at the surname distribution maps. And a variety of different websites have those surname distribution maps. We're all familiar with Archer's DNA Atlas, and Howard Matheson runs a very good Facebook group dealing specifically with surname distribution maps, a very, very useful resource. So I'll give you an example of what happened when I put the name Spearin, and the way that I spell it in my particular family is S-P-I-E-R-I-N. Okay? Quite unusual. I put it into the public profiler website, and there it is up there. Which one do I press? I think it's that one. Yes, there's Spearin up there at the top. S-P-I-E-R-I-N. And you can see that there's just a little coloured blob around the UK and Ireland. If I zoom in on that, then there's a little green bit on the east coast of Ireland. Those are all my cousins. And there's a little bit around the southeast England. And if I zoom in, if I change the spelling from Spearin to Spearing and add a G on, everything moves over to northern Germany. So I'm German. Or am I? Are the Irish Spearins related to the German Spearings? If I add an S onto Spearing and make it Spearings, It all moves down to Holland, southern Holland. So this gives me an idea that I want DNA from these places. And this is where the surname distribution maps can be very useful for helping to identify your target audience. If I anglicize it and make it Spearing, everything moves over to England. So now I've got Irish, English, German, Dutch. Are they all related? Are they not? Perfect question for a DNA project. And then I look at America and Canada, and there are loads of them over there, and probably as soon as any Spearing or Spearings arrived in America, they said, Spearing, okay, we got Spearing here, yeah, you're Spearing. So everybody probably has been anglicized in America. What percentage of the American Spearings are Spearins, or Spearing, or Spearings? So this is a question, again, that DNA will address. And these are the maps from London, or from Britain. You can see that it's the Spearing name is concentrated in the southeast, the southwest rather, and also you can look on Ancestry for a state-by-state breakdown of the names, and you can see that I'm mainly interested in the eastern seaboard area. For America, for England and Wales, again it's repeating the southwest of the country. And for Scotland, there's hardly any Spearings in Scotland, so I don't have to worry too much about Scottish Spearings. Archer's Surname Atlas, again, focuses in on southwest, and because you can do it by poor law union, it actually is helping me identify those particular villages that I need to go and visit with a box of DNA kits in the back of my car.
Really?
And then that's Howard's Surname Distribution Maps website, Facebook group. Next question, has your name been taken? Is there already a DNA project that is researching your name? And the thing to do is to go to the Family Tree DNA website and check for your name. And I'll show you how to do that maybe in the discussion afterwards. But you can simply just Google FTDNA and then your particular surname, and that will come up with...
It won't.
It won't? No? So
I've just tried to find my own.
excellent, excellent.
You have to put, there is, yes. You have to put Family Tree DNA.
Oh, that's interesting, because I always use FTDNA and it always works for me. It didn't work for you. Okay, so either FTDNA or Family Tree DNA, and then your surname, and see if it comes up. But we'll do a little practice session in the interactive part of the program. If there is no project, then you simply go to the FTDNA application page, there's the link there, and you actually ask to request to set up your own project. So this is how you do it. You would go to your just Family Tree DNA homepage, click on projects, this search bar comes up. Look at this bit here, it says equals, begins with, contains, ends with, and sounds like. So there's a variety of ways that you can search for your surname or the variants. If you just put in equals, it'll just search for that particular variant. If you have one specific variant, you don't have to worry. If you've got 20 variants, maybe it's just better to put in the first 3 letters and an asterisk, and that will actually bring up those particular names. If your name is taken, there are several options. You can either collaborate with that administrator, you can offer to co-administer the project, or you can ask to take it over. All of these are feasible options, and I say again, ask Susan Mates, because she has particular expertise at negotiating with existing project administrators to try and get your foot in the door. And this is Susan Mates. So get support, and we've put up at the start some sources of support on the first few slides. Susan has been the Guild's DNA advisor for a long time. She's been using DNA since 2001. She has got a very mature DNA project with over 300 people in it, and she has published her results in the Guild Journal back in 2006. And she offers a lot of free advice and guidance, so do please contact Susan Mates with any particular problems you might have. She is a fund of knowledge and expertise. Step 6 then is to create your own project profile and project website pages. Your application for a DNA project is approved by Family Tree DNA. They send you a password, a GAP password. This is for your administrator status. You log on with your GAP password and you create your own DNA project web pages in about an hour. There's only 2 of them. There's the project profile and the project website. It really only takes an hour to design these pages, and once you've designed them, you are up and ready to run, and you can start recruiting. And the first recruiter is yourself. Now, I'm going to run through these very quickly. 1700, okay, fine, I've got 3 minutes.
If you're a female and you've got Y,
That's true. It'll be either yourself or it'll be one of your close victims. So the project profile is what people see when they do a search for their name, like we just did, and I've done a search for Spearin, and it comes up and it says there's 6 Spearins in the database, and there's also some projects where these Spearins are actually involved. There's a DNA Surname Project, which is my one, and if you click on that, then you get this page. It gives you a member count, the project website, which is the link to the other page you're going to design, and it also has a description here. Now, if you scroll down, then this is the description, and this is what you will just write in the relevant boxes yourself, a brief description of your project, but importantly, also the variants that you want to have in your project. And that's really important to actually list very carefully the variants that you're going to put in. And I'll tell you more about that tomorrow as well, because this is how you're going to attract people into your project. So that's the project profile. It's just a quick couple of paragraphs.
Doesn't adding these variants in throw out a lot of red herrings?
Yes, it can, and that's why you have to be very, very careful about what variants you choose. Particularly if you're interested in globalizing your study and attracting Americans. I put in Spearing as one of my variants, but I know that I'm going to have Spearins and Spearings and Spearinks. So, you will attract a lot of people, and your surname is Laws. Okay, you're going to get tons.
If I'm law, I go to 200,000 or 300,000.
Yeah.
On my database alone, which I've only solitary kept it to LAWS and LAWES, because even then I'm dealing with 70,000, 80,000 people.
This is why it's so important.
That's only the ones I've found,
And that's why adding specific, the more variants you add, the bigger your project is going to be. And if you're going to globalize it to America, where they anglicize everything, you're going to get a lot of laws that were never laws to begin with.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The interesting dilemma is if you want to try and prove that variant isn't a variant.
That's why, as we heard in the last session, it's probably better to start small and expand as your capacities allow. So that's the project profile, and that's just really a very brief blurb, but it's where you have your variants. If you click on the project website link, then that takes you to the actual project website pages themselves. And let's look at the top bar here, make it bigger. In the first tab, about this group, it has the background, the goals, the news, the results. These are pages that you will create for yourself. The background to your project is really just a summary of where your one-name study has taken you so far. The goals are the ones that you have there on the table. And you will choose specifically which ones are pertinent to your own situation. The news is really just what's happening with the project now. It's really for updates. And then the results is more to do with your interpretation of what the DNA actually says. It's different from the results pages, which are automatically generated by Family Tree DNA. The only thing that you have to do with these in due course is to group people into different groups, but you don't need to do that at the start of your study. And then there's the Join Request tab up here, very, very important. You'll need to send that link to every laws or every person in your study because that's how they'll join the project. And it'll give them the option of either buying a kit de novo, or if they already have been DNA tested, they just sign in and then they automatically become part of your project. So that's the setup. And once you've done all those steps, then you can start testing people. Test yourself, test somebody close to you, test your close collaborators, target families with few surviving Y DNA lines, get them to join while they're still there, and then test complete strangers. And that's the real challenge. Remember, we get Y-DNA 37 tests for £80 from GOONS, but there's also various sales on at Christmas, and also be prepared to fork out your own money. In terms of recruiting, the first step is to get the sitting ducks, and this is why putting your variants in is very important. I took over the Farrell project recently. Here are all the various surname variants for Farrell. These are the number in the database. So if we just look at Farrell, there's 105 Farrells in the family tree DNA database. Only 26 of them are in the Farrell project. 79 of them are not in the Farrell project. And if I total up all the variants in the database, all the variants in the project, subtract them, there are 409 potential variants out there that are not currently in the project. So I wrote to them. And you can do this very simply by asking Janine at Family Tree DNA to send a bulk email to all of your variants in the database that are not currently in your project. Now, a lot of them will not be Y DNA. They'll be autosomal DNA or mitochondrial DNA, but they will have contact with other relatives who might very well do a Y DNA test. So it's very, very worthwhile at least establishing a relationship with them and trying to engage them. And by just doing that bulk email, I got 10 new members in the space of 2 weeks. So, and, you know, that's a significant number of people. Secondly, within your project, over time, as more people join, you'll find that they have matches with your surname of interest, and those matches are not in the project. So the other thing you can do, and this is what I did with the Farrell project, is to check which of the Farrells in the project had matches who were also Farrells, but weren't actually in the DNA project. I wrote to them, and 2 more people joined the project. So in the space of 4 weeks, I got 12 new members. So it's well worthwhile doing, and all it took was an email, 2 emails, and that was it. This is the email. I'll just leave that up there so you can actually see the template, and then you can freeze that on the YouTube channel, and you can copy whatever you wanted from that.
What do you mean in the database when not in the project?
Right, okay. Family Tree DNA has 600,000 people in their database. Some of them are Farrells. In fact, 105 of them were Farrells, and 26 of them had joined my Farrell project. 79 had never even heard of it, or had seen it but thought it's not relevant to me because I'm a woman, or whatever. I wrote to those remaining 79 and said, "You're not in the project. I see you're a Farrell. Please join."
How do you search for them?
It's very, very simple, because you, first of all, you just put, like you did with your name, you put your family tree DNA and then your name, and then that'll come up with whether or not there's a project. But if I just go back to a few slides back, there we go, put it in here. If you do a project search and put the surname in, what will happen is,
Did that not just produce
it produced the number of surnames, people with the name Spearin 6 in the database, and it also has the number of projects. Now, that tells me that there are 6 people, 6 Spearins who are actually in the Spearin project. They spell it that particular variant. The project actually has 34 members, but only 6 of them spell it that particular way. So what I would do is I went through, say with the Farrell one, I put every surname variant one by one into that search function, and then created a table and allowed me to calculate that there's 466 Farrell or variants in total in the database, but 409 are not in my project. So then you can do a target those people that aren't in your project by asking Janine to send out a bulk email. It's a simple way of getting sitting ducks, because you don't have to convince them to do a DNA test, they've already done it. So that's a really important thing that I discovered relatively recently when I took over the Farrell project.
I'll ask you about that later.
Sure. I'm just going to finish off by talking about recruiting. Here's another standard letter, I'll just leave it there. If you're on the YouTube channel, you can pause this and just pick and choose whatever wording you like from the actual email itself. The take-home message is, I see you're a Farrell and you match somebody already in the project, would you like to join? And like I say, I got 2 people from actually doing that. And it's just a question of engaging them. Don't tell them too much, keep it relatively brief, but try and hook them in. You're basically a salesman, trying to get people to buy the DNA or buy into the DNA project. So, with recruitment, you should contact fellow researchers with the same surname. Recruit people with established pedigrees from Ancestry, MyHeritage, RootsWeb, Genes Reunited. How many people do that? Post on genealogical fora, or forums, if you prefer. Message boards, mailing lists. Write to local family history societies. Start a Facebook page to attract recruits. Create a web presence. Post links to your study everywhere. Write to everyone in the telephone book. And view Debbie Kennett's video on social networking, which is a very, very useful way of exploring different social media for getting people into your project. Set up a dedicated website. Point people there. Set up a Facebook group or a Facebook page. When I took over the Farrell project, the first thing I did was go to Facebook to see if there was a Farrell Facebook group. There are 2,815 potential DNA testees. You see the way I'm thinking. So they're sitting ducks in a way. You know, I've got a Spearman project that has 200 people in it, but it's taken us about 3 or 4 years to get up to 200. Ed?
Do you regard that that they've got their Facebook page and they're sort of all on there, that they want to be part of something? So you sort of interpret that as these are more likely to be, yes, I'll do the DNA test.
Absolutely. People who are in, this is a Farrell clan project, so it's a clan. And, you know, people do post their genealogies there. They say, oh, is anyone related to Edward Farrell, 1762, who came to Massachusetts? And I've had great success posting here. 2 people from the Facebook group so far have actually taken the DNA test, and they're blogging about it or messaging about it on the Facebook group. So it's creating a momentum. Also, a blog is very helpful. And this is just me doing the sort of things that I'm going to be doing in my one-name study anyway, talking about the name and surname dictionaries. I just do a short blog about that, post it on the Facebook group, and then a whole new conversation starts on Facebook about the origins of the Farrell name, getting people engaged, motivated, etc. And the workshop session, I've left the questions there on the table. Look through the goals, and this is something that everyone can do as a little personal project, and pick out the ones that are best for you. Do you have any difficulty deciding, and why? And let's discuss that. Secondly, what variants would you choose? And I think that's a very, very important question. The great thing about entering the variants in your study is you can change them as often as you want. So if you find you're getting too much of one kind, you can take them out. What individuals or groups would you approach to be tested, and how would you go about doing it? And be very specific. If you can think of specific named people, that would be very good. And lastly, what problems do you have with DNA? And we'll have a general discussion about that as well. So let's have about 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll have about a 15-minute discussion afterwards. We have to finish here between 50 minutes and, well, another 20 minutes or so, 20 to 25 minutes. So we've got about 25 minutes to finish, and then we'll have a 5-minute turnaround.
Can I be clear? Are we only talking about Y DNA?
In terms of your DNA project?
Your question.
In terms of the questions, these are specifically directed towards Y DNA projects. So I would focus on Y DNA, but don't rule out autosomal DNA or mitochondrial DNA. You don't have to, but it's entirely up to you. It's your project. No. Okay. Right. Well, in the last 10 minutes, let's go around the table and find out exactly the various answers that people have given to these questions. So we only have about 10 minutes at the most, and we want to be out of here by about 25 past at the latest. So it'll be relatively quick. Just as a general question, first of all, did anybody have any particular difficulties deciding on the objectives for their own particular DNA study?
Yes.
Yes, you did? Would you like to say why?
No.
No?
I can see the benefit of it with a widely distributed small name, but with a well-established worldwide name like my own. No. I mean, I'm part of Clan McLaren, who claim that Laws is part of Clan McLaren. Now that may be true or may not be true. Ben Laws, the mountain, is only just up the road from their ancestral grounds above Buddha. But in truth, it's all long shots.
Well, it would be a massive undertaking to do a DNA study with a name like Laws, which is probably going to have lots of variants and probably have a huge worldwide distribution, because most of these DNA studies are going to attract a lot of American testees. So if there's a lot of Laws in the family tree DNA database, and like I said earlier, there's 600,000 people in that database, so a lot of them will be Laws, they will want to join your project, and you might end up helping them with their genealogy.
Yeah. I suppose the way things have gone with me is that I started one name studies in 1984, having done Laws family history for 10 years and not got over the brick wall. And after 40 years, I'm still not over the brick wall.
How would you feel about starting a DNA project specifically for people resident in the UK?
I reject it. Yeah, it's too, well, it's technically I'm involved with too many other things. I've got so many irons in the fire and other things now. And international things. As you said, I said earlier, I'm involved with Dear Myrtle and hangouts internationally, and more and more my one name study is getting pushed to the side because other things are moving on, whereas my one name study is not moving on; it's static.
Do a lot of people have that problem that time is really one of the major barriers to doing all the work? And taking on a DNA project on top of everything else is where are you going to find enough hours in the day? Ed has a question over here.
But I've almost got the impression that this is going to do the work for me in some ways. This is a small investment of my time to just wisely pick some individuals to try and persuade get tested. And then the results are basically going to give me more than the effort I've put in.
I think in your particular situation where Friskin is a relatively rare surname, you have relatively few branches. And the question is branch 1 connected to branch 10? And those are just those are all that you've just got 10 branches in the study. So with a rare surname, I think the DNA project can answer a lot of questions where the documentary evidence runs out. So I think yes, it can in that kind of situation. But for the Laws project, you probably would be swamped by the number of people in the study, and it would be very, very difficult to organise it.
If I did my mother's side, which is Mooney, you imagine what that would be like. My grandfather named all his houses Avoca in the Wicklow Mountains. I've been to Avoca, it's a lovely place, I'd love to come to that, I'd like to be there now. But I've traced the Irish in the family back to 1820 in London, and there's no indication they ever went anywhere near Ireland.
Question from Ed?
I've come across some very vague references that perhaps Friskin or some close variant was the ancestor of the Sutherland clan. And that's a huge, well-established DNA Project. So as soon as I've got at least one result, I'll be approaching them.
Absolutely, and you can encourage that particular member to join the Sutherland project as well to see if they match up with any of the other people in that project. Of course, any Sutherlands will turn up in that own individual's matches, but it's also useful. There's no reason why you can't join several surname projects, especially if you think that the surnames are connected. Anybody else have problems with the objectives and deciding on the objectives for their study? Yes, one question.
I don't think you've listed, if the objective is to decide whether your surname has a single or multiple origin.
And
It is there, right. And the other one is it a valid objective, or do you think it's silly to say the objective was to eliminate a variant?
No, I think that's a very, very useful objective, because I think one of the objectives of the DNA study is to study the evolution of the surname, and Susan Mates has done a great job of that with her Mates one-name study, but also to eliminate those variants that are not actually related to your particular surname of study, even though they sound the same. Question over here?
So what would you recommend for someone who has only female surviving relatives?
Pick another surname. I know. No. If you take the family finder test, I mean, presumably there must be male survivors with that surname. That surname is still in existence.
Oh, yes.
Question is, you don't know whether they're actually related to
Anything
you.
to do with me or not.
Exactly. So what you can do then is, because you probably know your first cousins, and you probably know your second cousins, maybe even your third cousins, but do you know all your fourth cousins?
I don't. I only know my first cousin. I only know my first cousins, and they're from the female line, so then. And I don't know anybody else.
All right, okay. Well then,
Families.
what you can do is you can trace your tree up, and then trace your tree down to all the descendants, looking for somebody on that male line, and use them
If I could
as a
find-
proxy for your Y DNA, or your father's Y DNA.
Why can't you use mitochondrial DNA?
A mitochondrial DNA will just go mother, 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 mother,
Yeah.
and you're going to change the surname every single way.
And you don't get enough.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get enough mutations.
Sorry?
You do see relatedness.
You do see relatedness, but you're going to get
For your name.
you're going to get 400 matches on autosomal DNA, and it's only $99. So it's a much better test to do. The second question then was, what surname variants would you choose for your project and why? Did anybody have any difficulty addressing this particular question? Yes?
My biggest problem is the fact that parish clerks and everybody else have the foggiest notion how to spell. And I never know. I mean, I normally search for like P star L because I never know what the vowels are going to be. I'm doing Pepler. You'd think everybody could spell that, but they all have a different opinion. And,
We all have that problem.
yeah, and I have people that every single record they have shown up with a different spelling, which is really handy. So deciding how many to limit it to was my biggest problem because I just have so many.
Yeah.
There's actually an easy way around it as well. Variants are just useful for attracting people, and if you're going to do a bulk email and you want to have that variant in your list to make sure the bulk email goes out to that variant who isn't in your project yet and you want to grab them and put them in. But you can just take the variant, put whatever variants in you want to. You don't have to restrict your project to any particular person. So for example, on my Spearman project, I don't restrict membership at all. And I get people with different surnames coming along and thinking, well, you're a baker, why do you think you're related? And they'll give some explanation. I'll say, fine, you can stay in the project, but you don't have Y DNA results for the Spearmans, so I'm not going to group you.
The best match I've had so far. Best match I've had so far is I have a perfect match for one fellow on 67 markers. He's a Peplo. The person he matches is Drakeford.
Well, something strange is going on there. That could either be a non-paternity event.
Find out what happened there.
Yes. If you get a chance to go on to the Who Do You Think You Are website, Jeff Swinfield has, no, it's Genetic Genealogy Ireland, or it's one of those two. He's done a great presentation on how DNA ruined my family tree. And He is the administrator of the Swinfield DNA Project. He did DNA testing, and he found that his DNA didn't match his cousin, and he was like, oh gosh, how am I going to break this news to him? I better test another cousin. So he tested another cousin. The two cousins matched each other, but he didn't match either of them. He's not a Swinfield. And he's running the one-name study as well, and it's a fantastic presentation. We have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid. If you do have questions, if you write them down and leave them with me, I will try and address them in tomorrow's presentation as well. But thanks very much for your attention, and thank you for the audience.
Can I just say that if you want wine with dinner and you were thinking about ordering some, can you see the changeover?